Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. I'm joined here today by Mr. Carl Benjamin. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh,
appreciate it. I've been following you for years now. I think like about 7, maybe 8 years, since 2016. So it's a real pleasure to be able to talk to you. I wanted to ask you to get straight into it first. I've heard you speak recently that you're focusing on philosophy. You're actually studying philosophy, right?
Yeah, I've just last year I finished a degree in philosophy, and I'm doing more now, but I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
About what I'm doing, just in case.
Just in case. Yeah. Wise. What made you want to study a degree? If you're going to take a degree, I presume you're in your 40s, roughly the same age as me. What made you want to take that time out? You're running a business to actually go and study philosophy.
I actually didn't take any time out. I just did it in the evenings.
Really?
And thankfully, a lot of my work here kind of dovetails with it. So I didn't take any time out at all. I was just really busy and really tired.
You just grafted through
it. No, I really did. I just buckled down, and basically I didn't get to see my wife for like 4 years in the evenings. The reason I thought it was important to do philosophy is because a lot of the time the philosophy is the sort of study of human thought, and it's important to know why you think the things that you think and how you think the things that you think, because beginning from what your beliefs are to understand them as rational premises and then follow them through to a logical conclusion is not an easy thing. And there's been a huge amount of work done by incredibly intelligent people that are on the very subjects that we want to think about. And really, philosophy is kind of at the heart of what the sort of culture war that's going on now is. The people who have been trying to undermine our civilization for, decades now, they are using philosophy against us. And so I thought it'd be useful to have a knowledge and background in what they are doing to us in order to be able to create counter-narratives and rebut what they're saying.
When you say in the culture wars they're using philosophy against us, you're talking about the woke radical left.
Yes.
How are they using philosophy against us?
Well, you'll notice that they don't ever appeal to a new set of values. They always appeal to the values that we purportedly hold. We like equality under the law. We like equality when it comes to democracy. One man, one vote, the same law that appeals to everyone else. But what we aren't is for equality of outcomes, equality of property. We're not for equality of status, even. We think, if someone works very hard, then, sorry, I've just come off being ill, then they deserve credit for that. That's not what they think. And so what they've done is taken our commitment to certain forms of equality and merely expanded them into other realms. And they also dovetail this with our concept of freedom. We think freedom's a great thing, obviously, because why wouldn't you think freedom's great? But when we think of freedom state action. We think we shouldn't be oppressed by the government. And we can even go further and say, well, we shouldn't be oppressed by corporations. Okay, fine, these are all perfectly legitimate. And they've taken that even further as well to say, well, I'm being oppressed by my own body at this point. Which is why I need to transition, or which is why I'm being oppressed by the words you say, which is why we need speech codes and things like that. So their version of freedom is, we've got not a narrow version of freedom, but a classical version of freedom. And they've expanded this in the same way that they've expanded the concept of equality. Sorry about this. In the same way they've expanded the concept of equality to mean things that we didn't think it meant. And in fact, in many ways, to mean things that are opposite to it. And so equality to us is something that a person possesses. I have equal status under the law or in the political system. But to them, they've made it mean something moral. And I don't believe in moral equality. Some people are bad because of the things that they do. And I will not accept them as having the equal moral status, like if a murderer versus someone who isn't a murderer. But you can see in a person like Keir Starmer that he believes that the murderer actually deserves our sympathy, because for some reason the murderer isn't responsible for his own actions, which is why he spent his early years as a lawyer going around trying to abolish the death penalty for murderers in foreign countries. This was his mission. He did this for free often. This is a calling for him. And I'm like, well, okay, I don't agree with that at all. I have a completely different moral view. I think if someone murders a child, then yeah, they deserve to be hanged. I'm pro death penalty for that person because of the things that they've done. And so we don't agree on what equality is. And in the same way, I don't agree on what they think freedom is. I don't actually think you are being oppressed by your own body. I think that you are a product of your own body, and you have to come to terms with the fact that you are a corporeal being, a consciousness that is produced by a corporeal being, and you just have to accept the thing that you are. And in fact, you can make yourself better, not through outside intervention, but by your own personal virtues, in a much more sort of Aristotelian, classically Greek sense. If you work hard and do the right thing for the right reason, then you'll become a better person, and you'll look better, you'll feel better, you'll be better regarded by your fellow man. But instead, they want to take artificial managerial approaches to this. So no, we can just use science. Take your Ozempic. We'll make it so that people aren't allowed to say bad things about this group of people or that group of people, because those people live under the tyranny of characterization. That's what all hate speech laws are. It's about characterizing a group. And that has become a form of tyranny to the left. And I'm sorry, I just don't agree with that.
We call them the left. It sounded like you're against equality of outcome, but you're for equality of opportunity. And you believe in meritocracy. So there were some people on the left who used to believe that.
There were. And those people are now on the right. Because the left is engaged in what they call a dialectical process.
Okay.
It's a process of making ideas compete against one another until you get to the next stage. You synthesize something out of them, then you move to the next stage. I'm not actually for equality of opportunity.
Okay.
Because equality of opportunity sounds to someone like you or I like a perfectly good and fair thing. So, well, why wouldn't you? But if you were, say, some left-winger who wanted to use this to advance yourself towards communism, you would say, well, hang on a second. Okay, I want equality of opportunity too, but I noticed that guy began his life in a 4-bedroom house, and that guy began his life in a flat share without access to good food, proper education. And so we need to level the playing field down so these guys both start at the same place. And so suddenly...
So you can't have completely good faith, reasonable positions without them corrupting it with injecting their gibberish into it.
That is precisely what the problem is, right? And so... this is why I did the degree in philosophy, because I was getting tripped up by all of this stuff before I did it. And so, and the thing is, in a way, they're right. In a way, they're correct. That is true, because we weren't limiting the scope of what we were actually asking for. We can just recharacterize what we're asking for here. I would like non-interference from the state.
Okay.
That's fine. That doesn't mean that I need to be liberated from my own body. That's not an ideological word that can be twisted and given new meaning and meant to mean its antonym in some cases. I would like property ownership. I want to own my property, because implicit in the concept of property ownership. I know. I'm a long way from becoming a communist. But implicit in the concept of property ownership is my right to do with that as I want, because I own it. I can do with it as I want, and therefore I don't need to say I want, markets or anything like that. It's all implied, and it doesn't become an abstract ideological watchword. I want political suffrage. That means I don't have to use the word equality. I'm entitled to vote. And other people can make the same demand. They can be entitled to vote. And so suddenly we're getting away from the ideological language that's abstract and universalizing.
Okay.
So it's like, freedom. Well, that can mean anything I want. Equality, that can mean anything I want. No, property ownership is something very specific.
Yeah.
And well-defined, non-interference from the state, completely, again, it defines itself within the term. And that way it's difficult to co-opt. I mean, you could, in a very uncharitable way, end up getting to quite extreme points on that. But to be honest with you, okay, if you want to make non-interference from the state an extreme position, well, I'm all for it. Every interaction I have with the state is negative, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
As long I never want to see an agent of the state, and I never want to deal with them. I never want to give them my money. So the more non-intervention from the state I can get, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
You're happy with that?
Yeah.
How do you deal with being called alt-right? I mean, do you resist it? Are you comfortable with it now?
Well, I've just never been alt-right. What they're saying there is a white identitarian, and I don't believe in the tyranny of category. Again, white is very much a word like freedom. It can apply to anything in any time, in any place. Like, the lights are, if they're white, anything can be white. But I'm personally an Englishman. And so I'm someone from a particular time, place, culture, history, and people that moves on through the centuries. I mean, if there was a solar flare that turned us all purple or something, I'd still be English, even if I was purple and not white, right? So it's for me, this is a very abstract categorization that I just think plays into the left's game. They win through the power of abstract categorization rather than sort of concrete realization. And I think if we actually call things directly what they are, rather than including the category of the thing, then we're actually on much firmer ground.
So you studied philosophy in a way to kind of level up your strategy in the culture war.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly why I did it. We've got to be able to beat them at their own game, basically.
Do they have a real philosophy, or do they just have a pathology and an ideology?
They have a philosophy, but it attracts people with pathologies.
Okay.
You'll notice that the average left-winger is not the kind of person you'd want to spend a lot of time with.
Yes.
This is something a lot of people have noticed.
Yeah.
Because it appears to be a perennial feature of it. And I don't think it's an accident that the philosophy attracts these kinds of people. Because, I mean, I don't know about yourself, but I'm a family man. I've got lots of friends and family. I've always been quite a social person. So I've never felt resentful against society. Right? I've always had all of the normal things that a person has, or been able to get them because I'm quite a normal person. A lot of these people aren't normal people. And in a way, we should be sympathetic to that, actually. But also, they can't be allowed to just judo flip the positive and well-meaning ideological perspectives that the average person has, to turn them back on themselves and start using them as a weapon against their own civilization. Right? That just can't be allowed. And that's what they're doing, obviously.
Why do they want to attack their own civilization, in your opinion?
Because they're resentful of the things that they can't achieve that other people can achieve. Because ultimately, we're not really equal.
So, at the core of this, they do have a philosophy. It's not just an ideology. But upstream of that, we're saying something like, these people are essentially just miserable.
Yes.
And they've been miserable
their whole lives. Yeah.
Under any circumstances.
Yeah.
Probably they're so damaged that even if we gave them everything they were asking for, they just ask for something new anyway.
Well, I mean, they've got to the point where they literally want to liberate themselves from being a material being at this point. Like they think no one should ever go hungry, no one should ever be cold, no one should ever be tired, no one should even feel, like, even for a moment, someone feels as if they don't fully identify with the biological sex that they have. They want the ability to just, all right, you're all going to refer to me by a different word now on that moment. But that could change again the next day because there's no material requirement for it. It's all about the freedom of how their will operates. If they will something, they think it should just be manifested in front of them.
So, okay, so if I used other language, would you say it's fair to say that these people are heavily invested in unmooring language from reality?
What do I say on that? I mean, that's definitely something that they do. What they view language as, they view everything as being socially constructed.
Right.
And so they don't like physical necessity. And so if you say, well, you were born male, therefore you are going to become a man, they would say, oh, you're a biological essentialist. And everyone on Earth, apart from these people, is a biological essentialist because biology is, of course, the root of what a human being is. But they think everything is socially constructed. So, and in some ways, some things are. Like the nature of our language is something of a social construction, as in it's not something that is biologically necessary. If when you were born, you were picked up and dropped in Japan, you'd speak Japanese and not English, right? So it's not biologically necessary. But the phrase constructed makes it imply that there was a constructor, and actually nothing about our societies was actually planned by anyone.
Right.
What we are, a series of untold number of small interactions like we're having now that over time build up into traditions that people are then raised in. And so you kind of absorb all of this stuff that isn't necessarily biological, but it is something you have inherited from the past by being a part of the civilization that you're in. And so to say constructed isn't really the right phrase, but once you do frame it as if it's constructed, well, now you're at license to just construct something new.
Right.
Why should I accept the authority of this and not something else? And if you are in a position where you think that, well, biological sex is a social construct, which is where they end up going, well, now, why can't I use science to just redo what nature has already made? And you arrive in a position where I think that some of the stuff that's going on right now is going to age very badly in about 50 or so years, probably not even that long.
Not even that long.
Yeah, but like they're going to look back like we look back at lobotomies. Like, what were we thinking?
Yeah.
You know, human beings are not just material to be worked upon by scientists. You know,
it's not even like they do a very good job. I mean, the medicine itself is pretty barbaric.
Yeah,
you know, making 2-year-old penises out of forearm flesh is not a good strategy.
For anyone who hasn't seen the videos, I mean, if you've got to have a strong stomach for it.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. You said for them, there's an implicit creator that they rage against. A creator.
Sorry, go on. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, just the idea that if I say the creator, it kind of implies God.
Yeah.
They think that there's somebody did this deliberately, and what you said is no. There's just millions of micro interactions that over a period of time, we watch the timeline, we move in a direction. There's that much intentionality here. The fact that they insist on intentionality, is it a kind of the position of a sort of a paranoid conspiracy theorist?
No, but it does end up sounding that way, doesn't it?
Right.
No, it's not that they are paranoid conspiracy theorists. They view everything as being the product of a will, and human will. And in a way, they are kind of right, because if everything is the amalgamation of small, deliberate interactions, then sure, there is an aspect to that. But the thing is, it becomes such a sort of tapestry of things that have happened that no one person was in control of. You can't really unravel it without unraveling other things that are attached to it. And so you can't, there is no particular creator, again, not talking about God, but like human agency. But they come from a position where they think that everything has to be rationally justified. They are looking for a rational grounding of morality. Now, this is a school of philosophy called materialism, where they believe that everything is merely material, and therefore everything can be essentially enumerated and rationally understood. Now, I don't know that that's true. It could well be that there are literally limits to the human intelligence that allow us to only comprehend reality to a certain degree, because a human being will just never have an IQ high enough to understand why, you know, the more we drill down, the more complex and bizarre it becomes. I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to understand it. But they begin at a position where the human mind essentially can comprehend anything, and therefore potentially can comprehend everything. And therefore, if you can have a form, and propositional logic is basically the one tool that they have. If X and Y, then Z, right? Just a standard syllogism. And most things that you do in your life are not based on propositional logic. Like, you know, I had some meat out of the fridge for breakfast this morning. No particular reason. It was just there. It just looked good. I didn't use any logic at all. I just thought that looks nice. I'll have some. I'm hungry. I may as well eat it. I didn't put any reasoning power into it. And most people's lives, it's all habitual. You get into your car, you drive to your work. You haven't had a single rational thought so far. You know, and there's no reason that you should have done. You know, this is just what a normal habitual life is, and that's what most people's existence is made out of. Until you need to have a particular rational consideration, and even when you do, most of it should be quite small scale, right? You don't tend to make world-changing decisions very often, actually. Most people, I mean, when you go to buy a house, you know that there are a lot of known unknowns in that, right? So you go to buy the house, you go, right, okay, I'm going to buy this house here. I assume I'm not going to lose my job. But you know there are a bunch of things outside of, I have my deposit, I want to buy a house in this place, I buy the house. That takes out, that line of logic. There's a lot around that.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot around that you're just assuming or kind of ignoring. And that's the thing with all propositional logic. It is narrowing and, in a way, kind of totalizing. You know, you can allow it to take over your mind if you say, no, this is true, that is true, therefore the conclusion must be true. And yes, technically, if you're like counting, right, 2 + 2 = 4, yes, that's always true. But real life is a lot more complicated than that. And if you allow a kind of ideological, propositional way of thinking to take over your entire worldview, as in you say, well, men can become women, therefore I will get a sex change. Well, okay, you can say these things, and you in a thin way they have some truth to them, or maybe, I mean, not in that particular example, but in my opinion. But if you believe that's true, but you're not accounting for all of the other myriad of complex factors that are all interplayed into all of this.
The thing that bothers me about that is the same people say the meat of the body doesn't matter. It's not important. And then in the next breath, I'm going to get my meat carved to look like somebody else's flesh plumbing. And I'm like, but you just said it's dangerous. It's going to hurt you. You're on antibiotics for years, aren't you?
Yeah, well,
I believe it's like,
oh yeah, it makes you a medical dependent, essentially for the rest of your life, as I understand it. But also, if there's no biological necessity out of the way your body is, why do you need confirmation surgery?
Yeah.
If it's all
in the social construction.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you need to change your body?
Just say, I am now a woman. Yeah. And then the high order of trans just says you're a woman now.
Exactly. And then the government accepts it now for some reason.
Yeah.
But this is the point. Their philosophy is not consistent, obviously.
So do you think the way that they're reasoning, do you think it reflects a critical lack of humility? Maybe they're just not humble enough to say, actually, like you just said, there are certain mysteries of the universe we're never going to be able to understand.
Well, it's possible. I don't know, but it's possible. Oh yeah, there's definitely a lack of humility in these people. Obviously, I mean, you see it. Essentially, they're all atheists, and they know they're atheists, and so they kind of set themselves up as their own gods. I don't like using this kind of terminology and framing it in this kind of way because it almost seems like a cop-out to kind of dismiss them. But there is an aspect of this where they are the most important thing in their own lives. And as soon as you become a parent, you realize you're not the most important thing in your own life. There are other things that are.
It sounds like an accurate description. I'm interested to know, you feel it's like a bit of a cop-out. Is that because you've heard too many people use this line of reasoning for too long now? Or
no, it's just that it's dismissive and doesn't fully explain their behavior.
Okay.
It is a presupposition they have that there is no God. They are the most important things in the universe.
Sure.
And therefore, and it's their consciousness and will that is the most important thing for them. Because that's what they consider themselves to be, the sort of consciousness you feel in your own head, sort of thing. But it doesn't really explain anything, and it doesn't. It can't really be. It's hard to argue against them.
Yeah.
On those grounds,
Yeah.
So, but it is true. So
as you've done the degree, is there any element of philosophy that you found that you got very interested in or very excited by that you weren't expecting to? Was there anything that really popped up for you?
Yeah, Aristotle. Anyone who knows anything about what I say is basically, essentially, all of philosophy was resolved in about 350 BC by Aristotle. There's just not really anything new to say about what a human life ought to be. So on one side, you've got Plato, who's the famous Athenian philosopher, who is a very abstract and complicated thinker. And he thought, well, what we ought to do is set up a perfect republic that is in line with the immutable and eternal forms that somehow pervade metaphysically through the universe. And Aristotle was a Macedonian, and he went to study under Plato, and he was like, no, this is basically all wrong. And what a person actually ought to do is just be a good person, as in, don't do. He's the one who coined the term the golden mean, which is basically the position of virtue is between the excesses of deficiency, between deficiency and excess. And so basically, if you exercise too much, then you end up hurting yourself. If you exercise too little, you become weak. But if you exercise just about enough, and there's no hard number for this, you'll know it when you're on it, You exercise just about enough, then you'll be healthy and you'll live a long and happy life. And everyone knows instinctively that is true. And he begins from this perspective where it's like, look, just be good, be the virtuous man, do the right thing for the right amount, for the right reason, and you will have success and happiness and decency. Go and be a man of the city. Go and have friends. Go and have a wife and family. Work hard, earn money, be decent. It's not radical, And it probably wouldn't need to be enunciated if we weren't in a position where the left were attacking everything we considered to be a virtue. But honestly, if anyone watching is like, okay, where do I start? Just Aristotle's ethics. Just is Nicomachean ethics is just the best place to begin.
It's interesting. So what stands out for you in philosophy, and then you cite a man who puts together a proposition for how a person ought to live. So I came through to philosophy after years of trying to help people recover from narcissistic abuse. And one of the things that I noticed was, before the narcissistic abuse, just as normal Westerners in a consumer capitalist society, we don't have a sense of right and wrong. And we have no ideal for how to live. And it actually makes people very, very open to psychopathic and narcissistic abuse because they don't know what to say no to. So were you looking for that when you went into the philosophy degree, or did it just, you found it whilst you were on your journey?
I'd say I found it when I was on my journey. I've never been a very extreme person. I've always led a quite mundane life, really. And so I suppose that's why Aristotle appeals to me so much.
Right.
But I think that the issue that a lot of people have is that we're in an era where there is no political capital and moral capital to be made out of setting a righteous order. It's a lot more fashionable to deconstruct and to dismantle what we've inherited from the past. And the thing is, what we've inherited from the past is a actually quite honorable and traditional way of looking at the world. And if you think about the people from the past, well, the modern left, the progressives, would like to render them as bad people. But whenever you see like an interview with them, they don't come across like bad people at all. They come across like sympathetic, sensitive, intelligent, educated people. Even just, I mean, you can look up like from the BBC, like random interviews with people on the street, and you realize how articulate these people seem and how considerate they are and how they logically lay out their thought process and say, so, and this is why I did that. And I just think, I don't think I could do that on the street these days. I don't think I could get someone to explain in a very reasonable way exactly how they came to this position. And so actually I'm starting to think that the deconstruction isn't the difficult part of life. Actually, it's quite easy to smash something. What it's more difficult to do is build a habit of life that produces excellence. And that's what virtue ethics is for.
What do you think was the cause of that degeneracy, that rot? Are we too wealthy? Is life too easy?
Well, I mean, if I had that answer.
Yeah.
I mean, there are always going to be in every society a certain number of people who feel like they're not getting what they deserve. And given enough time and the proper ideological tools, they can begin attacking the over society that they think has wronged them. And this can happen in any society. It just happens to be from ours. The Enlightenment is a very intellectually focused movement and period of time in the West, and it was very aggressive to what came before it, which was the kind of theological and traditional society. And a part of it is based in an extreme view of what liberation ought to be. And what this means is the structures around us have to be rationally constructed from a social contract, or else they're invalid. Now, there is an argument for this, but there's also an argument against this, especially as we look at what has been constructed and how, frankly, unsuccessful some of it has been, especially throughout the 20th century, and say, well, this kind of hubris, when it comes to wide-scale planning, might actually have all been avoided if we were slightly more nervous about tinkering with things that are essentially foundational to our entire civilization. And so it's not that we can't make changes, everything changes, but we have arrived at a point where we assess everything that we have based on, would I have created this ex nihilo, out of nothing, right? And so the answer to that is, well, no, I wouldn't have, King Charles, and I wouldn't have had the Queen, obviously. But is it bad that we had the Queen's funeral? Like I've never been like a monarchist or anything. I've never cared about the royal family. I was genuinely moved. I was just gripped watching the Queen's funeral that whole day. I was like, okay, because it was a civilization on the move. It was doing something. You know, it was like, oh my God, look at that. You couldn't choose to put this together. And yet this is what we have, and it's amazing. Everyone watched it. It was like the most watched thing ever that has ever happened.
Yes,
and it's like, okay, but why? You know, if I wouldn't have made this from nothing, why would I want to get rid of it? Because there's something that, you know, something everybody about it was fascinated with.
Yes.
And it's this continuance of the tradition that actually is a lot more important than we give it credit for. And so beginning with the question, would I have made this out of nothing? Well, that doesn't make it bad. But that's the standard we use for everything. I mean, Keir Starmer wants to get rid of the House of Lords. It's exactly the same proposition. It's like, well, would I have made this if I was just sitting down with a blank sheet of paper? No, of course not.
No.
You know, I'd have a republic of some sort. But that's not what we started with. And that it doesn't mean that this is bad just because it didn't start from nothing. It grew out of a series of very complex events over 1,000 years of political history. I don't think we should just get rid of it. It's obviously served some sort of function to last that long, even if we can't reasonably, through reason alone, justify why it exists.
Yes, I agree with you. And sometimes I wonder if it's my age. Like, I was much further left when I was younger. And then people ask me about, I'm from Liverpool, where people are, as you know, they're Labour and they're socialists usually. And they're not really royalists. And I found myself defending it. And I was like, oh, I've never heard these words coming out of my mouth before. But my defense of it was, well, what have you got? Like, what do you propose? It's something. You're proposing nothing. And when you're offered a blank slate, what do you fill it with? Porn and reality TV. I mean,
well, that's exactly. And this is what I was saying about, like, creating the order is way more difficult than destroying an order. Destroying an order is really easy. Like, you just need to intercept one generation's understanding of itself, and then that's it. It's gone forever. And you can see this in the church, like in the 60s. And my parents, all the boomers, were guilty of this, really. The boomers were like the anti-church generation, because when they were kids, they had to go to church because their parents and, like, you know, the greatest or silent generations made them go to church because it was what you had to do. And the boomers resented this and they didn't want to do it. And so they didn't. And so now I don't go to church. I don't make my kids go to church, you know, and my wife's like, we should do that. And I'm like, I know we should, but I like my Sunday mornings, but we should go to church. But that has been broken. That continuum has been broken now. And that's, again, way more than 1,000 years old in this country. Like, the Anglo-Saxons were going to church in the 9th century in exactly the same way that my grandparents were going to church on every Sunday. You know, it's exactly the same. And that continuum, that's a magical thing. You can't just make that up. You know, you can't. And once it's gone forever. So,
are we in the realm of talking like Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, the lament of losing religion, losing tradition? Because, yes, of course, from our modern eye, some of these things seem silly, but if there's nothing there, we put worse things there. It's something like that, right?
It seems to be the case, yeah.
So, are you naively religious in any?
The problem is that I was raised irreligious.
Right.
And again, I don't blame my parents for this thing. You know, they're not at fault because they're just people of their time, right? Everyone around them was like this, and there was no evident negative consequence for it in the immediate sense. So why would they think, oh well, you know, it's fine. You know, like, look at our civilization; it's a good civilization. We don't need to do this. And there may not be any direct linkage, even, but I remember, and I've told this story a few times, like, my wife wanted to get all of I've got 4 kids, she wanted to get all of our kids baptized. I was like, okay, you know, I'm totally fine with that. And obviously, you know, all the family came down. And I saw my parents in the church singing the hymns, and my dad was having an amazing time. For a man who's not religious, doesn't want to go to church, he was having an incredible time. He's there with his full chest bellowing these hymns. And I don't know them, because he never made me go to church to learn them.
Yeah.
He got dragged there by his parents. He is having a nostalgic experience in this church.
Yeah.
I mean, it was perfectly nice. You know, I didn't object to it. I could tell he was getting a lot more out of it than I was.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, right, okay, this is why sometimes kids have to do things they don't want to do, like go to church, right? Because when they're older, they will appreciate what you've inculcated into them, and they'll realize, oh no, I'm carrying my civilization with me into the future.
Yes.
That's what's happening.
Yes.
And like you said, if we take that away, well, what are we replacing it with? And whatever it is not going to be as sort of spiritually fulfilling as that.
It's a funny thing you're describing. I was made to do it because I was at boarding school and it was chapel every day.
Oh yeah.
And I know when I'm talking to people sometimes that maybe of a certain generation, a little bit older, there's almost like it's almost like a qualifier. You're qualified. You went to chapel every day. I sat there and thought about, I don't know, sci-fi and horror books that I was
playing
reading.
Nintendo or something.
Yeah, Nintendo. I wasn't concentrating.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it has this like you're saying this. You paid into the tradition. You did it, even if your mind wasn't there. I wasn't into it. But then I also do look back fondly. I look back with nostalgia. There was some. I was at boarding school in Taunton. There's some beautiful cathedrals there that I went to around Christmas time, and in that moment, I hated it. But I look back and I think, as you've just said, I've never thought that before. Put religion to one side for a second. It's part of our civilization. It's part of our tradition. And as you said, the Anglo-Saxons back in the 9th century would have been doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, just in a different language. But
yeah,
they were praying to the same God for the same reason, to get the same effect that we're losing out on. And so
there is something compelling about that unbroken thread, isn't there?
There is.
You
know what's interesting is King Charles is descended from both William the Conqueror and Harold Godwinson.
Really?
Yeah. So it's like, again, it's one of those, like, you can't make up a 1,000-year unbroken thread.
Yeah.
It either exists or it doesn't exist. And if we get rid of it, then, this is why I'm not a Republican. It's not that I like the monarchy particularly, or King Charles, but this is what we've got to carry.
So I see where you're coming at this from. Is there any non-rationalist, mystical side of you, spiritual side of you that thinks, yes, there is a God and I have a relationship with God? Or can you go there?
As I said, I've been raised very irreligious. I'm a filthy materialist, I have to admit, right? I don't have a spiritual side to myself at all. And I get this from a lot of Americans, especially. Where they're like, oh, you'll come to Jesus. I'm like, I feel like you're telling the man in the wheelchair, don't worry, you can just stand up one day.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, okay, maybe. But I just don't feel, whatever organ inside, your heart does that.
Yes.
I just feel mine is not switched on or whatever. I don't have it. But I'm very cognizant and conscious of the fact that I don't. But it's also that other people do, and that it's good that they do. And that obviously the Christian religion was obviously a net benefit for our civilization. So, I do hate all of this attempt to undermine Christianity.
So I spoke to our mutual friend, Professor Ed Dutton, about this, and he said that he's not particularly religious, but he would much rather live with religious people than not.
Oh, yeah.
So you feel the same way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I had the same because I can't. I would love to. I would love to believe. I see all of the benefits stacked up, and I have the same thing as you. It's not
in the heart.
I can't. It won't switch on. And I've had people say, "Oh, Jesus will come to you," and this, and I'm like, "You're talking in a magical code that I don't have the codex for. I don't know what you're saying to me. It doesn't mean anything to me." But
this is the curse of modernity, that we're in this position. I do feel it's a bit of a curse.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, there isn't. We have. Well, mate, this is a question I would put to you. Obviously, we have progress. If your teeth hurt, we don't have to kill you. We don't have to put you out of your misery. We can fix it.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a net benefit or a net deficit to this progress to the modernity?
I think you can't deny there's been a net benefit for the material well-being of humans. Obviously, the problem is it doesn't have any sensibly defined limits, and it turns out that human beings, as the product of evolution, if that's how you believe it, kind of require limits. They require having borders and boundaries and barriers that they aren't supposed to cross in order to make their own world make more sense. And you see this with kids. Like, I remember when I was a kid, my dad was in the forces, and so he'd get occasionally, he was just a bureaucrat basically in the RAF, so he did a lot of paperwork, but he'd be deployed to places like the Falklands or Iraq or something like that for like 9 months at a time. And my behavior as a teenage boy, I'd be going off the rails right up until my dad got back. And then my behavior would just switch back and I'd be completely normal again. And now, at the time, I didn't understand it at all. But obviously now I'm like, okay, yeah, I didn't have the fatherly authority figure to keep me in my place, which all young men really do need, I think.
Sure.
And this is just a part of being a human being. You need to know that there are limits to anything, or else you do end up going off the rails. And I've seen people who think that they can get away with all sorts of things, doing crazy stuff. And I mean, thank God, eventually it caught up with them. But it's just like, it's because you had the wrong perspective on where you are in the universe, your position in the celestial hierarchy here. And this is the sort of arrogance of thinking of yourself as your own god. And like you said, like, I would rather live among religious people, mostly because of the lack of hubris of religious people.
Right.
Like, mostly they are so much more humble. I've never met a Christian who is a bad person, like an actual practicing Christian, not somebody who just gave lip service to a Christian, who I would have considered in any way a bad or immoral person. And every time you meet them, they're humble and they recognize that their place in the universe is where they belong, and they're not raging against the thing that they're living in. They're happy with it and they get on with their lives and they're good people. And you just think, okay, what was the alternative here? Oh, well, let's tear it all down and have total freedom so anyone can just be anything. It's like, oh man, that's nonsense. Come on.
I think that's also affected my sort of creep rightward is on the one issue that you just mentioned, which is boundaries. On some of these things, when I was a kid, when I was at university, I was a radical leftist, social constructionist. And then what cured me of that was just traveling. I just traveled. I went to Malaysia, I went to Thailand, I went to New Zealand, and I was like, these people are perfectly capable of being corrupt and evil without white people teaching them to do it or enforcing slavery on them. Yeah. And then I realized what a load of patronizing drivel it was. And in these countries, when things work, they work because the boundaries are very, very strong. Thailand, for example, people think, oh, it's Buddhism and peace and love. These are ultra-nationalists, conservative, absolutely, completely conservative. And I thought, but this is working for them. And I came to the similar sound. It sounds like I came to a similar sounding conclusion to you, which is freedom ain't all it's cracked up to be. Just blank slate, do whatever you want, be whatever you want. Yeah. It's almost as though we're not really, human beings aren't really wired for that.
No, I don't think they are really. Not in the extreme way the left ones. I mean, obviously, to a certain definition of the word freedom, yeah, everyone, I don't want to be the slave of someone else. I don't want to be the creature of someone else, constantly doing something someone else is telling me to do, obviously. Yeah. No one wants that. No. That's not a very complex concept. But when we talk about freedom in a very extreme sense, where it's freedom from almost any contingency. And it's just like, okay, but that's crazy. And that leaves you in a weird place where you don't really know why you're doing any of the things that you do. And you don't think about the boundaries you ought to be placing on yourself then. You don't think, oh, maybe I shouldn't go and look at, like, for me, one of the things I'm most concerned about is, and I don't talk about this very much, but it's a real concern of mine because I have two sons, is pornography on the internet. Now, I don't know, I assume we're about the same age. And so when we were growing up, pornography was fairly difficult to get hold of.
If I had a device in my pocket at age 12 with 4K streaming porn in every niche, I would be dead.
Yeah, it's so true. And so when I talk to like these young lads who are like 24 just out of university and they've had this their whole lives, it's no wonder they're a bit weird when it comes to like their sexuality and women.
Right? The sexuality is weird. Their capacity to speak to women, to speak to anybody is a bit numbed, a bit blunted.
Yeah, it's weird. And it's just like, right, and I think that's, like you say, they've had the 4K porn in their pocket since they were, pre-teens. Yeah. And it's just, that is not on. I think that's really, that's done a lot of damage to an entire generation. I think.
Absolutely. And I'm not optimistic, but I think that's quite irreversible.
Yeah, I suspect so.
Because the neuroplasticity is so high. Yeah. I cited 12, but you're right, they're starting at age 9, age 10.
It can be really young. Like I just don't let my kids have mobile phones. Like my oldest daughter was 14 before we let her have a mobile phone. She's still not allowed to use social media or anything like that. And I'm not even happy with that. I would, if I was in charge, I'd make it illegal. They don't, you can, the only kind of phone you can have is the old Nokia ones where you can send texts and receive calls.
Yes.
Right. Until you're like 16 at least.
Yeah.
That I would just be, no, children are not allowed to use the internet.
And oddly enough, I've had this conversation with some people in my family, and they're very, very liberal in my family. They just give kids phones. And I'm like, you are protecting, especially for boys, but for girls as well. Girls over-consume porn. You're protecting your child's sexuality and sexual development by restricting that.
Yeah.
You're bursting it open and obliterating it by giving them access to it. It's not going to lead to a healthy place. It can't. And
also remember who you're giving access to them. Like, I don't want any of these people having access to my kids without at all, ever,
Yeah.
And the fact that I wouldn't even be present to monitor what was happening, it's just maddening. I just can't even imagine it.
Yes.
And like you say, it's boys and girls, but it's why would we want that? Why would we? Because we don't think about those things that can never be taken back. We never think about them because a child's innocence is something they are born with. Right, and it can only ever be taken away.
Yes,
and it feels like, from my perspective, that I felt like I was in charge and in control of what happened to me as I, as a teenager from 13 to 16 or something, went through the process of losing my innocence with the girls my age. Right.
Yeah, but you did it. Sorry to interrupt you. In our age, I was having a conversation with someone about this today. It went in stages.
Yeah.
It was graded.
Yes.
Intimacy was graded.
Yeah.
You held hands.
Yeah.
Then you might kiss. Then you're touching over the clothes, and then so on and so forth. And your brain can kind of acclimatize to it. You're doing it on your own. There's always an implicit audience with the device. There's always this voyeuristic second-person element.
But also, you're never doing it with another real person.
Never.
As well. Because that's the thing. Because, I mean, when you've got your first girlfriend and you're holding hands and kissing, she'll tell you if she doesn't want to do something, and you okay, fine, I don't, you're learning as you go. Both of you are learning as you go. So it's an education in what it is to respond to another human being in an intimate manner. That's totally gone. Oh, brilliant. I'm watching, an 8-person gangbang on my phone when I'm 12 years old. Brilliant. I've got this. Oh, I'm bored of that one. Let's go. And no wonder you can have weird rabbit holes and they develop strange fetishes.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's no wonder.
Yeah.
It's crazy that this is something. And again, one of those things in 50 years' time, people are like, why did you do that? That's obviously horrific, because as soon as a child's innocence is lost, that's it. It's gone forever.
Yes.
It can never be brought back.
Yes.
And this is why people laugh at the notion of Santa Claus. Was that no? That's kind of what Santa Claus is, on a sort of almost cultural way. It's an innocence that we collectively keep children in until they work it out for themselves. Like my oldest son's 9, and he still plays along a bit because I've got younger sons, but I can tell he's clearly like, okay, this isn't real. But but it's something loving that we do as a civilization for children, and this is why I hate people who are like Santa denialists. It's like no, it's not for you. It's for someone else that we're doing this. And it's the same with phones and kids' sexuality. It's just terrible. We need to be more conscious of this.
Definitely do. And that's before we even get into the catalyst for narcissism that is generated by the social media platforms.
Oh, yeah, God.
I mean,
could there be a worse tool to bring out narcissism than social media?
It's almost like it was designed by an evil person to provoke as much narcissism as possible.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're raising your sons there, and I heard you say the need to create. What did you say? The need to create an order and a structure.
Yes.
Do you think that masculinity has been under attack for a few, Mr.
Do I need
Benjamin?
to say that? Of course it is. Like everywhere, like men are being discredited as much as humanly possible by a very aggressive feminist ideology. At the moment, we currently have Greg Wallace being dragged through the media over some lewd jokes he made 20 years ago. You'll notice, he said, well, it's middle-class women of a certain age. That's true. They're all feminists.
Which is what he said when he made that comment is true.
It's absolutely true.
They're the ones who want to play the identitarian games.
Yep.
These are liberal, middle-aged white women, largely.
Yeah.
Fact.
And it's being done for power-seeking reasons.
Mm.
They want to knock off a male icon, which is the guy of MasterChef or whatever. You know, I've never watched him. I don't know who he is. You know, but they see him as being influential and being well-paid, being a kind of cultural touchstone.
Mm.
And so they're looking at, right, okay, we're going to gin up a bunch of allegations that are just slimy. Like, okay, let's assume that every one of these sort of like rude jokes that he told was real. What's the crime?
Yeah.
Like, what am I supposed to take from this? Like, what are you asking me to do?
Yes.
You know, what you want is for people to think ill of him and for him to lose his career. So you've taken a scalp. So you've knocked another person over on the grounds that they were an inappropriate man. And so, okay, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure these were inappropriate. I personally don't like this kind of bawdiness. Anyway, I think it demonstrates a kind of lack of self-restraint, frankly. But like,
that's good to hear, because sometimes I think, because I've heard similar comments, and I think sometimes on the right, there can be like it can be like a boys' club, and I was like, how do I curtail that but not sound woke and preachy? And I would adopt the same thing. I'd be like, we should be better.
Yeah, it's a lack of self-control.
Yeah, you know, and it's vulgar, so don't.
Yeah, it's vulgar, and it makes you seem like you're just not fully in control of your own impulses, frankly.
Right.
You know, and it's
a good angle.
Yeah, well, I think it's the right angle as well.
Yeah,
I mean, this is what I got from my dad, you know.
Yeah.
But I think he's correct on that. I think it lacks dignity. You know.
There you go. That's good.
Yeah.
We're concerned with. I don't even consider myself on the right, but when I look at the left, I'm like,
I didn't think I was on the right. but they're like, oh no, that's right wing. I'm like, okay, great, I'll stick with it.
It's so strange, because my family and friends ask me about this, and I'm like, well, look. Every time I speak to people who are quote unquote alt-right or conservative, I'll always say to them, look, I have very, very left-leaning views, and on this, I'm very progressive, very centrist. Yeah. Do you want a drink? Do you want to come for food? And I'm like, why aren't you screaming at me?
Yeah.
But my people on the left, oh, you're straight, you're white, I'm like, it's like you don't like me, but these people over here are happy to chat philosophy and history. They're having all the cool conversations, and you're screeching.
Look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, all Democrats.
Right. Yeah. I said right, but I meant left.
They went over to the Republican Party, and now they've led an insurrection against the Democrats.
Yeah.
Like if they can't understand what human relationships are, which is fundamentally what they're breaking. So what they want is the total freedom means freedom from the tyranny of other people's opinions. That's ultimately what freedom means.
To the left.
Yeah, to the left.
Yeah.
And so they are quite happy if you don't follow a particular set of rules to ostracize you from the group. No, you've got an oppressive opinion. You've characterized us in a way that we find objectionable, probably because we resemble that remark, and we want you gone. You're a bad person forever. And this is what they do this with groups. They do this in individuals. You're being transphobic, you're being racist, so okay, but all it was is a characterization of something. And if that's too much for you to deal with, then I think that you're the problem, not me.
My sister lives in California, and she's a never Trump sort of a person.
Oh, yeah.
And I told her that I was so delighted that Trump had won, that I was actually going to come and spend more time in America and set up an LLC there. And she was like, well, I'm glad that you're coming here, but he is awful. Why do you like him? And I'm like, how do you not see what is bad or good for your country beyond these facile, vacuous talking points from CNN and NBC? But academically, she's smarter than me. She's a smart woman. She's got smart friends, but it's almost like a cult-like loathing, a visceral loathing. How could you possibly like somebody like that?
Yeah, I mean, they've spent the last 8 years demonizing him. So, it's been non-stop demonization in the media, apart from on Fox News. And if they don't watch Fox News, then they never hear a countervailing opinion.
Yeah.
So, and the social media bubbles are not good either. The algorithm just feeds you more of the same because it wants your view, it wants your clicks. And so if you're like, I don't like Trump, you watch one video, go, Trump owned or whatever. Okay, great. Well, the algorithm's like, well, here's 1 million more videos like that. And all you see is this. And suddenly, I mean, one of the things they should always ask themselves is, okay, what's one of Trump's virtues? Tell me what you like, because I'm not a fan of Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn, but they're both men who I can see people do love. There are, a large number of people who genuinely love Jeremy Corbyn. And it's because Jeremy Corbyn seems to have deep humanitarian instincts.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they like him. He seems like a very genial, grandfatherly figure who is just wise and caring and will do the right thing for left-wing politics. So yeah, I can see why. But I totally disagree with everything Jeremy Corbyn wants. I don't want socialism. I don't want minoritarianism. Blah 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 blah. But I can see why people like him. So I consider myself not to be deranged about that person, right? I can point out why people like him and understand. But like people like, and don't remember, my sister's probably the same with Trump as well. Hates Trump and just will not hear what the virtues of the man might be. And so you say, okay, well, that is a kind of derangement then, isn't it? If you can't imagine why people like them, well, then that renders your entire world completely suspect. Oh God, more than half my country is actually evil and will vote for the new Hitler. Yeah. Brilliant. It's like, okay, but that's not really true, is it?
That's almost a sort of a falling back into delusion. And I wonder, on the masculinity issue, it's almost what I don't want to get myself into too much trouble. It seems to be the case, largely speaking, that the masculine principles and the masculine archetype can deal with reality and is cynical. When it goes wrong, it's cynical and bullying. The feminine is more utopian and it's idealistic, but when it goes wrong, it's delusional. Roughly speaking, something like that.
I mean, I would say that's not an unfair characterization. I think that I don't want to give the feminine side short shrift though, because women are much better at dealing with social reality than the men.
True.
Men are terrible at dealing with social reality a lot of the time.
We're the more Aspergy.
Absolutely. No, we absolutely are. And I mean, for example, if it wasn't for my wife, I would never attend anyone's birthday. Right? And it's not that I don't want to. I love going to my friend's birthday, my family's birthday, right?
Yeah.
I'm just really bad at remembering I'm supposed to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so my wife was like, right, don't make any plans this Saturday because we've got, in fact, my one of my kids' birthdays. I'm like, oh, thanks for letting me know. I would have taken him out and done something with him. We would have had fun, but it wouldn't have been a big birthday party where all my family got together for the thing, right? Because I'm a man and I just think in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. And so there is a reality they are speaking to there. They are speaking to reality, but they do tend to have a much more socially focused way of looking at the world, and men tend to be more individualistic and more, I don't know, sort of, it's kind of a hard and soft view of reality, right? For you, reality is something to manipulate and conquer and bend and construct out of, whereas for them it's to kind of smooth out, and to make pleasant. Which is why men live in like just desolation until a woman moves into the house and then she makes it home.
Yes.
And that's fine. That's totally great. I was literally a young man living in an empty apartment with just my computer and, the cooker, the cooker. And that was it.
Going, this is enough.
Yeah, it was totally fine for me, but it wasn't homely,
Yeah.
And, when I got married, my wife was like, no, we're going to have pictures, we're going to have cushions. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, darling. That's totally fine. I didn't have a reason for it, but I was just like, okay. And so it's just this, again, complementary difference in the way that we work. But young men ought to be taught by men is what this, I think, boils down to. And I think one of the problems with feminization of young men is because the schools are staffed mostly with women now. I mean, I don't know about when you were growing up, but I had lots of male teachers when I was young.
I did. I wonder if it was because it was a private school. In that sense, I was very lucky. I see now.
Yeah.
I realise now how lucky I was.
Yeah.
Majority male teachers I had.
Like all of my science teachers were male. And all, my history teacher was male. My geography teacher was male. Like one of my English teachers was male. Like I was only thinking about the other day, because my dad was in the RF, so we were just in an RAF school, which is just like a state school, basically. It's nothing special about it. And in fact, it's probably crap. But at least half my teachers were male, and I remember like having quite good relationships with them. Like with my science teacher, he would answer my stupid questions about Star Trek. I'd be like, could we really have a transporter? Would warp drives really work? He'd answer these questions, and so like having male role models around, even if they're not like that much of a factor in your life, I think is genuinely important for young men. And I think that them being, and it's the way that we approach problems is just different to women because we have a different worldview to women. And you should be exposed to both. I don't think women should be an alien property that you just, I don't know how women think. No, you should learn how women think, obviously. But I think young men definitely need men around them to teach them how to be men.
I just have a few more questions for you.
Go ahead.
Why do we have this open border policy on immigrants, Mr. Benjamin? I can't figure this one out.
It seems that the Bank of England is using a particular calculation, and that is the average the average wage of the country, like 28 grand or something, multiplied by just the number of people in the country of working age. And that's what they think GDP growth is.
So it's like a shotgun approach. Just throw humans at the economy and...
Yeah. If we just cram more people into a country, then that calculation goes up. And the scale of the potential economy of Britain goes up. And it's like, okay, but that seems like a really terrible thing to do.
It's a bit crude.
Yeah.
It's a little bit crude.
They are convinced that immigration grows the economy, and there's just no evidence for it at this point.
So it is an economic decision. They've decided this is what is necessary to keep the ball rolling.
I think for the people who run things like the Bank of England, yes. I think for left-wing activists, they're doing it to destroy our culture.
Okay. So there is that side. There is that argument as well. And it's deliberate and conscious.
Yeah.
It's about destroying identity, about destroying culture.
Yeah, the sort of people who work for the BBC or Sky News and who are constantly justifying all of these things and who are constantly privileging minority groups over the majority group, they're doing it to immiserate us.
Do you think that they are geographically located in places where they don't see the consequences of the policies that they're trying to enforce? Do you believe that's...
It's not just they don't see the consequences. Actually, in a way, they're beneficiaries of the consequences. They often are served by immigrants on lower rungs of society. So they themselves have very nicely air-conditioned offices at the top of high-rises, and the people that they deal with are well-educated professionals earning lots of money, and so they're doing very well. And so they're at the top of a pyramid. And they look down and say, yeah, no, it's appropriate that the immigrants are down there serving my serving my coffee in Pret.
They're like feudal lords.
Kind of, yeah. There's kind of a feudal lordship to it. And I think one thing to remember is the institutions of the British Empire never were destroyed, right? They're continuous. We're still living with the institutions of the empire. And you hear the rhetoric of imperialism everywhere. Like Theresa May was saying, oh, Britain's best days are ahead of us. Boris Johnson, we're going to be the world leader in this. And Ed Miliband, we're going to be a world leader in this. Hang on a second. Those days are over, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a world leader in anything. I just want a really nice, safe country to live in, raise my kids in, and be happy in.
Yes.
I don't want to have imperium over the rest of the world.
Lower your expectations, dudes.
It's not even lower your expectations. It's change your expectations. What I want is for the country to be beautiful.
Yeah.
What I want is for our country to just gorgeous. And so, I mean, because we see the evidence that people desire old England everywhere, right? Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. People, I mean, like millennials wish they were living in Harry Potter. It's like, sorry, that's our country.
Yeah.
That's our bloody country, is Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter combined.
Yes.
That's what we inherited. So why don't we just polish this like a gem, turn it into something beautiful? We can, we could literally have it so that every new building that's built has to be in this particular style or that particular style. We can have competitions with architects to create new classical or gorgeous, beautiful designs. Instead, no, we get these ugly concrete and glass buildings, steel buildings that are just like weird angles. If you go to Paddington, you get off the train, you can see this weird like concrete, steel and glass building. It's got weird angles on it, like it's a psychic attack.
Yeah.
Like, why would you?
It's aggressive.
It's an attack on the people it looms over. Whereas you go to like Wells Cathedral, and this is, oh my god, this is like, if I was going to believe in God, he would live in a building like this. You know what I mean? It is beautiful. And then you go down the little side streets, and you see just the weight of eons on the buildings, and it's all, again, it wasn't necessarily made to look that way, but it ended up looking that way because the people who lived there just took care of it and loved it. And we could have a country like that was just nice and productive and good, that wasn't just a global way station and economic zone. We could have that.
So obviously, you're not for socialism, you're for capitalism, but I presume...
Well, I wouldn't even say I was for capitalism, because this again, you've got this like abstract commitment to the concept of a free market. And it's like, okay, yes and no, right? Because there are lots of things that get traded on markets that are just immoral, right? We spent 100 years stamping out slavery because the market is totally fine with slavery. You know, it's totally fine, and the freer the market, the more slaves you're going to have on it, right? And so I'm against the kind of ideological thing because, again, mass immigration is another aspect of the free market. This is one of the 4 freedoms the EU is so committed to, and at the moment, mass immigration is the reason my kids are never going to buy a house. Right, they're never going to be able to afford a house because if you bring in, 6 million people in 5 years, which is what Boris Johnson did, well,
Is that a real statistic?
Yeah, that's a real statistic. Yeah,
it's fucking incredible, isn't it?
It's mental. It's just it's insane.
How is it not a crime?
Well, yeah, exactly. How is that not a crime?
We are a country of 66 million, or we were.
Well, we were.
We were.
Yeah. When Tony Blair came in, we were a country of about 60 million, I think.
60 million.
Yeah, and now we're a country of way north of 70.
That's insane.
Official statistics put us at 69, but it's definitely more than that.
And we don't. Some of these people won't be tracked. We won't know where they are. We won't know.
Millions. Like they estimate. Well, there are at least 1 million illegal immigrants just going around in the country. The thing is, it's going to be way more than that.
Yeah.
It's going to be way more than that. And so,
sorry, I pushed you off track there a little bit.
No. What was the question again?
I don't know. I just started thinking about 6 million human beings wandering around the country.
Yeah, the free market.
Yes.
That's an aspect of free market capitalism in the most extreme sense. Now, I'm not saying that every capitalist is committed to this, but it's just one thing that can be done under capitalism.
Yeah.
But that has a negative effect on my ability, on my children's abilities to buy a house.
Yes.
And so the free market is inhibiting property ownership.
Yes.
So I'm very much against the abstraction of the free market because if I want my kids to own a house, well, I don't want an excess number of people coming in and competing for those same houses.
Right.
I actually would like it to be a buyer's market rather than a seller's market. And so the ideological commitment to capitalism I don't have. I think I should just own the property that I own.
Sure. So last question: the arrest of and the imprisonment of Tommy Robinson and Keir Starmer's response to the riots. What did you think about that?
Wow. I mean, I think what's interesting is everyone wants to make this a class issue, and it is, but there's something more to it than that because Keir Starmer instantly politicized it by saying, oh, they're far right.
Yeah.
And when you draw a political line in the sand, what you're saying is the class of people in this country that are upset about this, which mostly in Labour heartlands.
Like Liverpool.
Mostly, like Liverpool, which went on late into the night. Liverpool was one of the most ferocious about it as well. But they were almost entirely in deep red areas. And so what is this saying to us? This is saying that this is the normal people of these places, just normal, regular, everyday people who feel like their country is under siege, who feel personally in danger from the people who have been brought here, and with good reason in many cases, and who feel that they are simply not being listened to. As Martin Luther King said, riots the language of the unheard. Well, why are they having riots then? And what did Keir Starmer come out and do? He, the leader of the Labour Party, came out and told them they are politically opposed to him. No, these are your men. These are your guys, Keir. Yeah. These for generations voted Labour, and you're drawing a line and saying, no, you're on the other side of it. You're my enemy. I'm putting you in jail. I'm fast-tracking you through the bloody jails. And it takes on the aspect of this kind of feudal lord, stamping down his serfs.
It did feel like that, didn't it? It was how dare you, disgusting peasants.
I'm doing something noble here. How dare you?
Yeah.
And it was just eye-opening, frankly. Yeah. And I mean, horrific. But and then coming out and saying, like, the Muslims are getting loads of your money now. We're protecting those mosques. You're going to jail. We're protecting these mosques. Don't you forget who we favour, who the grace of the Labour Party is shining down upon. And it bloody well ain't you. You stay in your place and you be quiet.
Yeah.
And that is something that people rightly characterised as, well, this is a two-tier society. Yes, it's absolutely a two-tier society.
Do you think that's part of the visceral response towards Tommy Robinson is that he represents that white British It's easy to call him far right. I mean, I've interviewed Tommy. He's not.
Yeah.
Well, he's not far right in my opinion.
No, he's very moderate politically.
Yeah.
He's not, he's not a political scientist or anything.
No.
And in a normal world, he'd vote Labour, right? In a normal world, they'd be his party.
Yeah.
The Labour Party has, of course, been captured by metropolitan forces that are insisting on diversity. The thing that Tommy Robinson represents to them is the injustice they have been committing against the working class.
Yeah.
Every time he speaks and says something true, as he's been doing for many years about, say, grooming gangs or terrorism or anything like that, they are constantly reminded not just of an inconvenient truth that they are trying to keep in the box, right? Which is, look, there is a problem with Islam in this country. Everyone can see it, right? But it's also the guilt that has accrued to the Labour Party itself, because you were meant to be the protectors of the people you're victimizing with this new community. You were meant to be looking out for them. You have wronged them. You own that debt of guilt. And that's why they hate Tommy Robinson, because if they for a second would say, you know what, he might have a point, then all of that guilt is kind of being held in suspended animation at the moment, just comes pouring down on them. And suddenly they admit, no, we should have done something and we didn't. And we're all guilty of it.
So it's a kind of scapegoating through psychological projection. I'm going to punish this guy very severely because I kind of know he's right.
Yes. And that way I can maintain a moral high ground. Oh, he hates these people who have done nothing wrong. The entire community is innocent. Therefore, he's just a villain. I'm morally righteous to punish this guy. But it's like, no, that's not true, is it? And everyone knows that's not true.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to follow the work that you're doing?
You can come to LotusEaters.com.
LotusEaters.com. Where we are right now. Come here.
Yeah.
I
go
watch
to the website.
I watch your YouTube pretty much every day. You've got new podcasts coming out every day. LotusEaters.com. Carl, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, man. Honestly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gents, thank you for your time and for your attention. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Cheers.